What's up, friends, and welcome back to Hot Air with me, Joshua Robert. This is the place where we take the news, shake it up, break it down, and call it out exactly as it is, with just the right amount of chaos, informed sass, and a little bit of research. I wasn't anticipating doing a second episode this week, but you guys know me. When I see something and I feel like I need to talk about it, I instantly go home after my day job and I'm like, okay, let's get to the gossip. So we are going to zero in on two stories that might kind of seem completely different or unrelated on the surface, but once you really get into them, they tell the exact same story. And we're talking about this absolutely unhinged rise of something I've never even fucking heard of, transvestigating. Like, what even is that? It's people on the internet playing detective with other people's bodies and basically inquiring or investigating as to whether they were born male or female and transitioned at some point and basing all of that on their visual appearance. We're going to talk Sweeney and Erika Kirk and how people are accusing them of being born male, and then another case of a straight man whose life was derailed after being accused of being gay in the military. And here's the thing. One of these stories is loud, viral, and very 2026 internet energy, and the other feels like something kind of from the past. But when you put them side by side, you start to realize nothing has really changed, and it is all still about control. It's still about labels, and it's still about people deciding who you are before you even get the chance to do it yourself. Expect a lot of bit of sass, a lot of bit of side eye, a lot of calling things out, and honestly, probably a few moments where you're like, wait, this is actually kind of really messed up, because it absolutely is. And before we jump in, make sure you are following me on Instagram and TikTok at _hotairpod. Head on over to my website, hotairwithjoshuarobert.com, to submit your listener stories, topic suggestions, and shop my merch. So take a breath, get ready to learn some new things today, and let's hit it. So first, we need to talk about this absolutely unhinged trend that is blowing up online right now, and that is the idea of transvestigating, where people on the internet, mostly in far-right spaces, are trying to prove that public figures are secretly transgender by analyzing their bodies, their faces, their posture, literally anything that they can zoom in on. And the latest targets? Erika Kirk and Sweeney. Now, according to reporting, these theories are completely baseless and rely on pseudoscience, distorted images, and straight-up speculation. Things like male clavicles or narrow hips, jawline to shoulder width ratio. Who the fuck knows? All of this nonsense that has been debunked over and over and over again, nor should it matter. And before I even get into the weeds here, obviously you know that I am not about that life where I'm going to judge somebody based on their appearance or wonder if I see a woman walking down the street if she was born male because she has broad shoulders. We are all literally built differently, from length to width to height to all the things. But the reason I thought this was important to talk about is because, well, Erika Kirk is a bit of a bitch and she talks a lot of shit. And I find it very interesting when the people that are targeting us being the queer community, trans people are my friends. Therefore, I consider them me and me them because I stand with them constantly. So when Erika Kirk says, don't be afraid to be a male man, which she said the other day, which was like one of the stupidest things I've ever heard anybody say, like be a male man. My dad was a mailman, okay? But obviously she meant male, M-A-L-E, man, M-A-N, you know? It was just ridiculous. But hinting at being trans is a bad thing, right? Be masculine, be butch. She's Charlie Kirk's wife, after all. R.I.P. Charlie. So when her own rhetoric comes back to bite her in the ass, that's when I'm like, yes, bitch, you had this coming. You built this storm yourself. But just keep in mind, Obviously, I'm not transphobic. I feel like some of these things that I might touch on may come across as like maybe microaggressions or like kind of on the fence of that transphobic rhetoric. I'm doing my best to just relay a story here. And here is where the story actually gets interesting because this isn't just random celebrities that are being targeted, right? Erika Kirk, who stepped into a leadership role after the death of her husband, Charlie Kirk, has been closely tied to conservative spaces that have pushed very rigid ideas about gender, femininity, and what women and men should be. And Sydney Sweeney, while not politically outspoken in that same way, has faced repeated scrutiny over her perceived alignment with more conservative or traditional values. From the backlash around her family's MAGA-themed party to debates over her brand partnerships and messaging. So what we're seeing is not just internet chaos. It's something way more ironic because the same culture that has spent years obsessing over trans people, questioning their identities, questioning whether they should even live or not, policing bodies and deciding what is real or not real when it comes to gender, is now turning that exact same energy inward. And frankly, I love to see it. Suddenly, Erika Kirk isn't feminine enough. Suddenly, Sydney Sweeney's body is being picked apart. Suddenly, they don't meet the standard, whatever the fucking standard might be. And that is the point here. Because when you build a worldview that says gender is rigid, obvious, and can be determined by physical traits only, you don't just apply that to trans people. You apply it to everyone. And one of the articles that I read today really highlights how absurd this has become. These online communities are literally overlaying skeletal diagrams onto photos, comparing body proportions and acting like amateur scientists trying to expose something that isn't even there. It's giving conspiracy theory, it's giving QAnon energy, it's giving I took one biology class in middle school and now I'm a fucking expert. But underneath the absurdity, there's something far darker happening. Experts say that this trend is rooted in both misogyny and transphobia because at its core, it's about punishing women who don't fit a very narrow definition of femininity. And here's where I'm going to connect the dots a little more clearly. When people, especially public figures, contribute to rhetoric that questions trans identities, that mocks gender diversity, or reinforces strict ideas of what men and women are supposed to be, they are helping build the exact system that clearly eventually turns on them. Because that system doesn't stop. It doesn't go, okay, we've targeted trans people, we're done now. No, it keeps on going. It gets more extreme, more obsessive, more paranoid. And suddenly, even the people who were once seen as the ideal, the right kind of woman or man, are now under suspicion. The article I read today that was on Yahoo, which who knew that was even out there anymore, it points out that this trend has been around for many years. It's not just popping up now, but it is spreading wider and faster because of how social media amplifies conspiracy thinking and rewards engagement over truth. And honestly, that's exactly what this feels like. It's engagement bait mixed with ideology. Because people are sharing this stuff not because it's credible, but because it's shocking, it's clickable, it's outrageous, and outrage spreads. And frankly, that's probably why I'm talking about it, because I was like, this is a hot topic. This is fucking interesting. Also absurd. And because I think it's important to call it out as I see it. But let's talk specifically about Sydney Sweeney for a second, because her situation really highlights how quickly this flips. So not that long ago, I'm sure you heard of it, certain corners of the internet were praising her, blonde, traditionally attractive, fitting a very specific aesthetic that some conservative spaces love to promote. And then the second that she steps slightly outside of that, apparently she gained muscle for a role, although she said she gained like 20 pounds of muscle in like 6 weeks, and that's actually physically, scientifically impossible. So she gained this weight for the role, right? She worked out, whatever. She probably looked a bit more muscular. Then she appeared in a campaign. I believe it, I want to say it was for Abercrombie. Was it for Abercrombie or American Eagle? One or the other. Promoting some jeans, and that sparked a lot of debate. She gets loosely associated with politics that people don't like. Suddenly, she's being dissected and labeled, and there are even viral posts questioning things like the size of her neck or her body proportions as proof that she is secretly a man, which is like insane. But at this point in the world, it's also predictable, which is also insane. that it's predictable. Because again, when your entire framework is based on appearance equals identity, you are setting yourself up to constantly question people. And Erika Kirk's situation is even more layered because the speculation around her was fueled in part by her increased visibility and leadership role, which, according to experts, often triggers these kind of attacks because it challenges traditional expectations of women being passive or submissive, which I find wildly fucking absurd. I'm going to use absurd a lot. I'm going to swear a lot probably in this episode. My dad actually told me the other day, because he listens to the pod, that he's glad I don't swear as much. And then I was like, well, don't say that because now I'm going to have to swear as much. So it's fucking crazy to me that Erika Kirk, when her husband was alive, would go on and on and on about these traditional values, women letting their men lead, women letting their husbands lead, and just like taking care of the kids and taking a back seat. Meanwhile, she's been running companies her whole life. She's been in a position of power. She's taken over that position of power after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And now people are coming for her. It's like, girl, you set yourself up for failure here. So it's almost like the rules were never really about protecting women. They were about controlling them, which, again, tale as old as time. Hello. And once you realize that, everything starts to make sense. Because if the standard is impossible, if femininity has to be perfect, soft but not too soft, strong but not too strong, attractive but not threatening, then eventually everyone fails. Everyone. And that's what we're watching happen in real time. People online have literally been calling this a taste of their own medicine, and so am I, pointing out that the irony that the same communities that push anti-trans narratives are now transvestigating people within their own communities. And while I get why people are saying that, I do think the bigger takeaway is actually more important than just the irony, although I fucking love the irony. I'm not even going to lie to you. I love it. This isn't just karma. This is cause and effect. This is what happens when you normalize tearing people apart based on how they look. And it's probably ironic that I'm even saying that because I love it, but I'm also trying to explain why it's not a great thing. But this is what happens when you teach people that identity can be judged from the outside. This is what happens when you create a culture that is obsessed with labeling, categorizing, and exposing. It doesn't stay contained. It spreads, and eventually it comes for everyone. And I think that is the part that should make people pause. Because if you are participating in rhetoric that dehumanizes trans people, and if you are pushing the idea that gender is something that you can figure out by looking at someone, you are actively contributing to a system that will eventually question you too. Whether it's your body or your face or your identity as a whole, nothing will ever be good enough. And honestly, that is the most telling part of this entire story because it proves something that the queer community has been saying for a long time. Transphobia doesn't just hurt trans people. It creates a culture of suspicion, judgment, and control that ends up hurting everyone. And now we're seeing that play out in the most public, most chaotic, most internet way possible. So yeah, it might look ridiculous on the surface. It might feel like just another weird online trend, but it's also a reflection of something far bigger, which is a culture that has become so obsessed with defining people that it's forgotten how to just let people exist. And the people who helped build that culture are now finding out exactly what it feels like to live inside it and be on the receiving end of something the queer community has been experiencing for a very long time. So Erika Kirk and Sweeney, welcome to the dark side, bitches. Now we're going to move on to a different story that sounds almost unbelievable at first, like something pulled out of a history documentary that you half watched in high school and thought wow, glad we moved past that. But we did not. We're learning today we haven't moved past a lot of things. We just gave it a makeover and a little bit better lighting and maybe a little bronzer because a man has come forward saying that his life was basically derailed after he was forced out of the army at 16 years old. 16. I didn't even know you could join the army at 16 because he was accused of being gay. Not confirmed, not proven, but accused. And according to reports, he says that accusation alone was enough to end his career before it even started and ruined his entire life. And sit with that for a hot second because 16 years old is not fully formed adult with a 5-year plan and a therapist. 16 is I just learned how to parallel park and I'm still figuring out my personality based on what music I like this month. And in the middle of that chaos, imagine someone in a position of authority deciding, like, yeah, I think you're gay. You should probably go. And suddenly your entire future, it really just evaporates. No due process that actually protects you, no benefit of the doubt, just suspicion dressed up as fact. Let me just clarify something quick. He was 16 years old. He is now 60 years old. He just came out with this story stating that he was removed from the military because people suspected him of being gay. So obviously, yes, the times have changed, but the point is the times have changed back. And here's the part that makes the story hit harder than people might expect. He wasn't even gay. Or he says he wasn't even gay, which, by the way, should not even matter. But in this case, it exposes something really important because the system didn't fail because they got the facts wrong. The system failed because it didn't care about the facts in the first place. It cared about perception. And once that perception existed, that was enough to justify everything that followed. And because this happened so long ago, this was happening in a time when the military, like a lot of institutions, treated being gay as incompatible with service, not just discouraged. It was actively punished. You had policies, you had investigations, you had this whole culture built around sniffing out anything that looked different. And when you build a system like that, you don't just create rules, you create paranoia. You create an environment where everyone is watching everyone, where suspicion becomes currency, where one rumor can carry more weight than reality. And that's exactly what happened here. One accusation, and suddenly this teenager at the time is being pushed out of the life that he thought he was stepping into. And what's wild is how familiar this pattern feels right now, because if you zoom out just a little bit, this is the same energy we're seeing in current conversations, especially around gender identity and who gets to exist comfortably in public spaces. We've just updated the language a little bit. Back then it was, we think you're gay, and that was it. Now it's, we think you're not the gender you say that you are, or you don't look masculine enough, or you look too masculine, or your voice sounds like this, or your body looks like that. It's the same obsession, just with a new Instagram filter slapped on top of it. And the part that people really don't want to admit is that once you normalize this kind of scrutiny, it doesn't stay contained. It doesn't politely stick to the group that you originally targeted. It spreads because the system itself isn't about protecting anything real. It's about controlling what people are allowed to be. And once you start policing identity like that, everyone becomes a potential suspect. Like, think about it. Everyone says Lindsey Graham is gay. Wouldn't be surprised. The amount of politicians that supposedly have, what is it called when they're gay and they marry a woman? It's their mustache. Is that what it's called? They're called, oh no, a beard. They're called a beard. There's so many politicians I've heard about that are apparently, seen on Grindr or whatever. These are all rumors and speculation. The rumors and the nastiness. If you don't know where that quote is from, well, Google it. Or actually, it's just from Housewives, okay? But if it didn't land, that's fine. There's actors like John Travolta who's been accused of being gay his whole life and was married and had kids just to keep up that persona. And like we saw just a little bit earlier, Sweeney, Erika Kirk, that specifically Erika Kirk has made comments before about being trans and gay and how it is not her thing. Girl, don't let it be your thing then. But it always comes back to bite you in the ass. So yes, everyone becomes a potential suspect. That is how you end up with a straight teenage boy accused and expelled. That's how you end up with someone saying decades later that the fallout from that moment followed them for the rest of their life. Not in a dramatic, exaggerated way, in a very real, very practical sense, like career gone, path changed, identity shaken before it even had a chance to form properly. And then, just to add insult to injury, when he later tried to seek some kind of acknowledgement or compensation for what happened, his claim was rejected. So it's not just that the system failed him in that moment, it's that the system also said years later, yeah, we're really not going to do anything about that, which is quite the theme, isn't it? Systems like this rarely look back and say, wow, we messed up. They quietly move on and leave people to deal with the damage. I think what really needs to be said here, because people love to frame stories like this as isolated incidents, is that this isn't just about one guy. This is about a pattern. This is about what happens when you create an environment where identity becomes something that can be weaponized. because that's really what this is. The accusation itself was the weapon. It didn't need to be true. It just needed to exist. And we still live in that kind of environment today. We live in a culture where people are constantly being labeled, analyzed, dissected, especially online. People feel entitled to decide who you are based on how you look, how you speak, how you move. And once that label gets attached to you, it can follow you in ways that are incredibly hard to undo. And again, it doesn't even matter if it's accurate or truthful what these people are saying, but that is the scariest part because stigma doesn't run on truth. It just runs on belief. And belief is a lot easier to manipulate. All it takes is one person saying something with enough confidence and suddenly it starts to stick. Then someone else repeats it, then someone else. And before you know it, you're no longer dealing with a question. You're dealing with a narrative that everyone and their mother and their goldfish deems as truth. And I think for anybody who doubts that, this is what I encourage you to do. It's okay if you don't know somebody who's trans or gay. If you have not opened yourself up to that or haven't lived in a town where that's even a possibility, go to Instagram. Find one account that is from a trans person. Go to their comment section. Read the awful things, hundreds and hundreds, depending on how popular these people are, thousands of comments that are the most transphobic, horrific things you will ever read. I think that's actually a really good start for people to understand, A, why this podcast exists, why I started talking about these things, but also just to understand why we fight so hard for our rights, why we fight so hard to feel equal. Like, I could go on Instagram right now. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do it. If my internet will work. Oh my God. Y'all, I don't know why I'm having such a hard time finding this. All I'm finding is how many fucking priests, MAGA, January 6th people that were pardoned are just, being arrested yet again for you know exactly what. And also that same-sex married couples with two men have the highest household average incomes. Doesies. Because we baddies, okay? We baddies. Okay, well, I'm failing miserably here at finding this, which is so funny because I literally find stuff like that every single day. But trans people get comments telling them to kill themselves, that they are an abomination. A lot of it has to do with Jesus, all the hoopla. So go dig for yourself. Please educate yourself. Do the work. It'll help you understand this community a little bit better. And I guess one of the bigger takeaways, we've had a lot of big takeaways, is just realizing that the same mindset that allowed all of this stuff to happen that I talked about in this episode is still very much alive. And it just shows up in very different ways, but it's really under the same umbrella. Because a lot of people like to think, well, I'm not affected by this, so it's not my problem. But these stories prove that's not how it works. This wasn't someone who identified as gay and was targeted for that. Sydney Sweeney and Erika Kirk, as far as I know, are not transgender, but because they built all this hate around it, and by they, I mean far right, very religious people, bigoted, racist, homophobic motherfuckers, built this system, sometimes it comes back to get you. And once that system exists, it doesn't check your identity before it hits you. It just hits you. So when we talk about queer issues, when we talk about discrimination, when we talk about why it matters, this is a part of the conversation, not because just this man's experience is the same as someone who is actually part of the queer community, but because it shows how dangerous these systems are for everyone. The same people who often support these kinds of very rigid, exclusionary systems are usually the ones who think that they will never be affected by them. They think they fit the mold and they think that they are safe until one day they do not. Until one day someone decides they don't quite look right or sound right or act right, and I can guarantee you they're going to go off on all of us gays when we're calling them out about it, saying that we're the ones spewing hate, we're the ones calling them trans, we're the ones that are, straight phobic or some bullshit new word that they're going to invent. But suddenly, because they're on the receiving end of some kind of scrutiny that they thought only applied to other people that they built, they're probably going to be up in a tizzy, and that's what this is all about, and I just can't wait. I can't wait. I hope Erika Kirk calls me. So whether it's people online transvestigating celebrities like some kind of unlicensed CSI unit or a teenager having his entire life, his entire future, ripped away from him because someone thought he might be gay. It all comes back to the same thing: control, assumptions, and a bullshit system that unfortunately hasn't changed that much. And maybe, just maybe, we can let people just exist. It's a wild concept, I know. And if you made it this far, don't forget to follow me on Instagram and TikTok @_hotairpod. Visit my website, hotairwithjoshuarobert.com, to shop my merch, submit your listener stories and topic suggestions that you want to hear me talk about on the show. I love you for listening. I love you for thinking, and I love you for being there. Okay? So whatever you do, don't go transvestigate anybody, okay? Let everyone live. Who gives a fuck? You do you. I'ma do me. Let them do them. And I will see you next Tuesday.